Well, let's take another argument. If you take a look at what the United States has done over the last 12 months, we're now running a $1.6 trillion deficit this year. And recently, the Obama administration upped that budget deficit by another $2 trillion to $9 trillion by 2019. If you take the more than doubling of the Fed's balance sheet, if you take a look at, the various government programs and bailouts, another country tried many of the same things, and it was Japan. Instead of rising inflation, a lot of the deflationists would argue, look at Japan, the outcome was deflationary.
Yeah, but you also have to look at the very different economic circumstances between the United States and Japan. We actually suffer from the opposite problem, or we suffer from a problem that they don't. Japan was a producing nation with a huge trade surplus in manufactured goods and a very high savings rate among its people. What happened was when the bubbles in stocks and real estate burst that were brought on by the easy monetary policy of the Bank of Japan, and at the root source of that easy monetary policy was their effort to artificially prop up the U.S. dollar, right? They printed too many yen and they kept their interest rates too low to keep our currency propped up so they can keep exporting to us. That loose money ended up forming bubbles in stocks and real estate. When the bubbles burst, instead of allowing the market to correct itself, instead of taking the pain, they tried to stimulate, they tried to prop up, and the Japanese government went deep into debt. But the difference was the Japanese government borrowed from its own citizens, and they had an ample supply of savings in which to loan the government. However, this hurt the Japanese economy. That savings would have been better used if it was invested privately as opposed to used for government programs. But the Japanese economy beneath the surface was fundamentally sound, and it was able to withstand all the foolish things that the government did. Now, when you look at what happened to Japanese consumer prices, and you say, well, gee, we didn't have a big increase in consumer prices. What I think would have happened had the government not done that, had the government not spent all that money and printed all that money, consumer prices would have actually fallen a lot more. And so we actually did have inflation in Japan. The inflation was in the form of prices fell by a much lower amount than they otherwise would have fallen had the government stayed out. And that would have been a huge benefit for the Japanese economy because it would have dramatically increased the purchasing power of average Japanese citizens. So they had that robbed from them. They had that extra purchasing power robbed from them because of the inflation that was unnecessarily created by the Japanese government. But we are in a much worse situation. We're not simply going to have prices falling by a lesser amount than they otherwise would have fallen. We're going to have prices going through the roof. If the deflationists would simply stick to the price of gold, then everything they're saying is true. Everything they're saying is going to happen to prices will happen in gold. But it's not going to happen in dollars. It can't.